This is the Haulin Assets podcast where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 128. Today, we're talking about the freight market, past, present, and future, which should be interesting. I'm eager to see your prognostications, Chris. How's it going?
It's going well. Now that you read that title, it seems like it should be like a Christmas story or something.
The ghost of freight markets past.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I'm Craig, by the way. Yeah. Okay. Nobody cares. Hi, Chris. So we should tell people, first of all, yes, you can go to haulinassetsllc.com and check out full show notes. You can go to motorcarrierhq.com and get tools and tips and actual human help with starting your own trucking company if you are ready to take that leap. But today, especially today, I want to encourage everybody to go to YouTube and type in Haulin Assets. If there's a G in there, I will hunt you down and correct you. But it's Haulin Assets. Find us on YouTube. The reason why I say that is because if you're not watching on YouTube right now, today we're going to be discussing trends and economics and stuff stuff that requires charts and graphs and that sort of thing. And so I'm going to be putting those on the screen as we go. We'll do our best to make it comprehensible to anybody listening who can't watch on YouTube right now. But if you have the chance, pop over, give it a look, and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, and it will also be in the show notes, those graphs as well.
Yeah. So anyway, Chris, other housekeeping things that I'm forgetting?
I don't think so.
I think we should be good. So I got to tell you, Chris, I've been a little itchy. You know, like I haven't had my fix in a while.
Like the springtime itch, or
No.
Not a physical itch. This is something different. Okay.
This is the metaphorical itch.
Oh, okay.
No, because we missed a week.
Yeah.
We usually do every other week, and it's been, bless us truckers for we have sinned. It's been 3 weeks since our last podcast. So I've been kind of jonesing a little bit for my Haulin Assets fix. How you been?
I'm good. Just busy, and that's the reason why I was out of town most of last week. And just it snuck up on me and didn't have time to get everything put together.
It's the way it goes. Chris was out partying as he does. You're notorious for this.
I am.
Just disappear for weeks
big
at a
time
time.
partier.
So what's been going on in the interim? How are things going for the company?
Good. I mean, it just kind of a little bit of the same old. We do have a pretty kind of exciting, scary, interesting announcement to make.
Oh, okay.
But I kind of want to talk a little. We'll just jump right into it. I want to kind of preface this.
So instead of jumping right into it, I want to jump right into it
with a story.
It.
Yeah. So back in the day, so we're talking, let's see, 12-ish years ago.
Wow. When I was just a boy.
We Motor Carry HQ, we had it for about a year. And that first year, it was just really me and one other person. And I kind of joke a little bit about this. That one other person was my mother-in-law.
Oh, okay.
So she kind of came on board in that first year to kind of help us get things off the ground. Actually, she was there for several of the first years. But I kind of joke that I lived every man's dream. I got to boss my mother-in-law around.
I'm sure that's how it works.
There was a ton of bossing around.
Sure.
Just lots and lots of it. But anyway, so for that first year, it was just really me and her. And then coming up on that first year, we decided that it was time to hire an additional person. And so we started the interview process. We were kind of hiring for like an administrative assistant, office manager type person. So that's what we put the ad out as. We got several people, did a handful of interviews, and one of the interviewees that we interviewed was Ariel, and she was like a perfect match for what we were looking for on the admin side. But then there was this other one-off weirdo that interviewed that had a ton of sales experience, but no real admin experience. And he was kind of thinking about maybe I want to look at something other than sales. He wasn't super happy with where he was at. And we knew that in our long-term strategy, that we wanted a salesperson, but we were thinking that was probably more like a good 6 months down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But we were really impressed with this salesy guy. And so, lots of discussions and talking, we decided to hire both of them.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, you think about it. I mean, it's
brand new company.
If you include myself, we're really essentially doubling the employee count in one fell swoop. And so we super nervous. We decided to do that. And that one salesy guy is somebody that you've heard on the podcast, Tyler.
Oh, okay.
He was in like episode number 3 a long time ago.
What a weirdo.
What
Hi,
a
Tyler.
weirdo. Yeah. he listens. So he's not, sorry, Tyler. So anyway, we kind of rolled the dice and hired Tyler, hired Ariel, and 12 plus years later, they're both still with us, and they have both had a tremendous impact in a really good way on Motor Carrier HQ. But when we were trying to make that decision, we were super nervous about it. And so that's kind of my preface. So then at this point now in the world of Haulin Assets,
now we're going to jump right into it, Chris.
Now we're going to jump. Yeah. Now that I've prefaced, now we're going to jump right into our jumping right into it.
I got to call you on that.
I'm confused now. Now I'm lost. Where am I supposed to be? Yeah. Where are we? What are we doing?
What is truth? Time is a flat circle. Okay, go on.
So, one of the things that I've kind of noticed over the years as I've watched a lot of trucking companies and some of them be super successful, some of them not so. A common thread between some of the more successful trucking companies is they've hired an operations manager and they've brought that operations manager on fairly early on in the company, so that operations manager's kind of grown with them. And so Nate and I have been talking and Chet for quite some time that, hey, this is probably something that we want to do. And months and months ago, we kind of, we're talking to a lot of different people. Nate and I, Nate's really the one that started the conversation. Talked to a guy that he's worked with quite a bit, and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this at some point. And he was thinking about making a job change. And, this is months and months ago, probably actually a year ago. And anyway, we ended up hiring this guy, and he just came on board at the beginning of May. And the coincidence is it's actually somebody that Nate and I have both worked with in the National Guard. Mm. And he actually deployed with me when I deployed back in 2012. Okay. So I've known him for quite some time. Great work ethic, smart guy, has a CDL, but hasn't really ever been on the operations side of trucking. But he's spent the last 5+ years in the military working on. He's worked full time for the military on operations stuff. Mm. So he's still in the National Guard, but he's kind of transitioned from full time National Guard to the part time thing, the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, which it's a lot more than that. Right. But the same thing that Nate and I both do. So anyway, his name's Brad. Super excited to have him on board. He's going to be a tremendous asset to the company, and we're going to kind of see what happens.
He better be anyway. We're watching you, Brad.
Yeah, we're watching.
Yeah, just from our high perch on this podcast. Yeah,
Craig has his eye on you, and what he says goes.
That's like right.
In everything that we do.
With the
Craig really runs the ship here.
With the one exception of I can't get my face on the side of a truck. So it's it continues to be that's my Moby Dick. That's my white whale. Okay, yeah, so this is. You said you had seen some other companies do this, hire an operations manager, fairly early on in the process. Haulin Assets is at 10 trucks. Is this what you're seeing other companies do?
I actually see them do it sometimes earlier than just 10 trucks. But somewhere between the 3 truck range to 10, 15, 20 truck range is typically where, at least around 10 trucks is when an owner of the company has to get some office support. And I've seen companies that do just, hey, I'm going to hire an office person that has a limited set of skills. They're cheaper. not and able to do certain little things, whereas we've kind of jumped in both feet and hired somebody that's got a higher skill set, a vaster array of experience, more expensive. And those people can typically, I mean, he can obviously do some of the simpler tasks, but we just feel like we're going to be able to, he's going to help us kind of get to that next level. And that's what I saw with Tyler and Ariel when we hired them. Like they were an integral part in to be able to grow Motor Carrier HQ into what it is today. So it's usually, in my experience, you got to be careful with this, but hiring a very capable person early on, even before really the economics of it might make a ton of sense, in the long run is a very good thing.
Yeah, it certainly can be. The way I think about it is acceleration potential, where if they are capable of going 60 miles an hour right out of the gate, you may not need them to yet, but that capability means you don't have to train them up to that 60 miles per hour. Whereas if you got somebody who is cheaper, but maybe less knowledgeable, less capable, then yeah, they can get up to 40 in my horribly strained analogy. They can get up to 40, but then you got to train them up to 60, and that's going to take time, and that's going to suck resources out of the company. And so it's, it's kind of rolling the dice. It's making a little bit of a gamble that you're going to want to get to full speed sooner rather than later. Is that fair? Is that right?
Actually, man, you just pulled that analogy out of your whatever.
My what, Chris?
It says you're something. I don't know where it came from, but that's a perfect analogy. That's a great way to put it. Because yeah, I mean, Brad is at a point where he can easily operate at 60 miles per hour, and we don't necessarily need that 60 miles per hour now, but that will get the company to 60 miles per hour, and he'll be able to easily grow into that 100 plus miles per hour, capability wise. So in the long run, it's going to help. And I kind of want to take a pause on this discussion with hiring Brad for right now, but I want to revisit it at the end of this episode. We'll talk a little bit more really about the economics of it, and it'll make more sense why I'm holding that off when we talk about the topic that we're talking about today.
Right, which is the freight market, which, as I understand it, Chris, is amazing, healthy, never been better. It's just perfect in every way, right?
Yeah. You did not hit the nail on the head. That's
so for those watching, again, this is where, some of the charts, some of the graphs are going to come into play. So I'll put this graph up on the screen now for people to check out. But okay, what do you want to say about the historic freight rates? Is this kind of where we want to start?
Yeah. So if you kind of look at the raw numbers, so we've got two charts. The first one's just kind of the raw numbers. The next one's really a chart. So the first one's a table. The second one's a chart.
Right.
And if you look at it in 2021, you see the freight rates, and during that time period, really just about anybody could make money on those freight rates. I mean, it was easy if you worked at a halfway decent pace. You could make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of dumb things, but you could still make money.
Sure.
I mean, there was a lot of excess, and it was a really good time for carriers.
When it was sitting at that 350 plus kind of
really all of 2021 was just really, really good. And really the first quarter of 2022 was really good as well.
So is that the kind of the COVID hangover was over, and things, it was like bottled up energy from the market finally got to gush out, so to speak. Yeah.
And so really, post COVID, you're looking at the latter half of 2020 is when things started to really get good. And then by 2021, end of 2020, all of 2021, things were really, really good. And that was that environment where you didn't have to have any kind of special skill or do anything really special. You could make money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So things are not that way now.
Things aren't that way now. So in May of 2022, the market took a complete 180 course correction, and freight rates kind of went, there was a huge dip in that May. Then they kind of normalized in June, and it's just since June of last year, 2022, it's just been a steady. So if you look at the chart, you can kind of see that increase, then the sharp drop, then it kind of came back up a little bit, but then since then it's just been a steady fall.
Yeah. Okay. So what does that mean for us going forward? How do you want to talk about this? How do you want to tackle it? What can we do anything about this?
This is kind of one of those things that, you can't really control the market. So, one, I think let's talk. So we've kind of talked a little bit about the past. We're talking a little bit about the present. Right now, May of 2023, we're still in that low market. Mm-hmm. And, from the articles I've read, people that I've talked to, other trucking company owners of other businesses that are involved in freight, the general consensus is that people feel like we've kind of hit the bottom. And,
I bet they said that in May last year.
Well, no, I don't think. Yeah, I doubt they said that in May last year. I mean, you could kind of tell that things were gonna course correct, and so I'm confident that if we're not at the bottom, we're very close to it. Right. You're not going to see big a rundown from here. And if you kind of look at historically at what has happened in the freight market. The freight market starts to turn and starts to recover when you have most, at least on average, or most trucking companies operating at a zero net gain or a loss. And
so it takes a critical mass of companies operating that way to turn it around.
And the general consensus is with most people, if you kind of look at what rates are coming in, what expenses are at, we're kind of at that equilibrium where, companies are either losing money or they're just kind of breaking even, and nobody wants to operate. Nobody's going to operate at that for very long.
Right. And who has this data? How do you know that a critical mass of companies is there?
There's a lot of different entities that really kind of boil down into this. Trying to think of a few. The DOT has some numbers. DAT has numbers. Is it Tumblr has freight rate numbers.
Tumblr is a little different.
I'm
just kidding.
So it's one of those. There's several of them that kind of have those numbers, and if you kind of watch them, you'll see what is happening, and really we're at a point. Looking at our numbers with Haulin Assets and the freight rates and what our operating expenses are. Our operating expenses aren't going to be vastly different than anybody else's. There will be little nuances here and there, but for the most part, we're operating where fairly efficient, expense-wise, fairly efficient trucking companies operate.
So you guys are doing you're doing a good job, and yet you can't catch up to the rates.
Right, and part of that problem is we still operate a little heavier on the spot market than we really should be, and that we'd like, and we're trying to change that, but.
If only we knew some weird sales guy who could help out with that.
Yeah. Who would that be?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, Chris. Then I'm trying to put myself in the heads of the listeners. Somebody who is thinking about going out on their own, getting their own authority, maybe thinking about building a fleet. For that person, how do I want to ask this question? Let me ask you this way. Do you know these numbers because it's fun and pleasurable for you to get all of these numbers and to kind of put the puzzle pieces together of what the market is doing? Or is it a business decision, like, I need to know this stuff, and if you're going to start a trucking company, you should too? Where should other people be on this?
That's a really great question, because I feel torn in that a little bit, because I see both sides of this equation, where you've got some people that I feel like overanalyze things and read all the data they can get from different sources to try to figure out, hey, what's going to happen? Outsmart the market. And in reality, what I think they do 90% of the time is they're over consuming, and they're consuming that data, which prevents them from doing, because it either does one of two things. They're either spending all their time focused, like learning and trying to absorb this stuff instead of doing things. You don't make money by reading data. You make money by doing things, and And so if you're spending all your time reading and not doing, then you're not going to make money. And then the other side of that equation too is if a lot of times, and I see this happen so much, is people just overanalyze, and then they kind of get you hear the term analysis paralysis. They just analyze, and it scares them so much that they don't know what's going to happen, and they get too scared to move forward on anything.
Yeah.
And so you kind of you want to know what's going on, and I like consuming some data, but I don't love it so much that I get to that point where I do like the analysis paralysis. Like I'll read some, and then I try to develop my own opinion on what I think is going to happen, and then kind of move forward. So I think it's good to get information from varying sources, but don't overdo it.
Yeah. It's a bit like the person who reads every single article in all, the 3 biggest newspapers in the country and all the magazines, and can't affect anything that they're reading about. It's at a certain point, it's entertainment, and you're wasting your time. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be informed at all. So, okay, Chris, you said you feel like the bottom has been reached based on these numbers you're looking at. Or at least hopefully. People are talking like it can't get much worse than this.
I think there's way more data to support the fact that we're at or near the bottom than there is that it's going to continue to take.
I mean, for one thing, I look at the inflation numbers, outside of just trucking, but the general inflation numbers, and go, hey, where's our inflation? Come on, man. We're going down. What's deflation? Thanks a bunch. So when can we expect a turnaround, and how sharp will that turnaround be?
That's a really good question, because if you look at, are we at the bottom, and what everybody's saying, you get I think the vast majority of the people are saying we're at or near the bottom in the freight market. Where you get a varying degree of opinions is when is that going to recover? If you think about it, if you look at a chart, the economy, typically you've got peaks and valleys, ups and downs. Sometimes those are very sharp. Sometimes they're a little more graceful and curvy.
Much like myself.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it, but now that you mentioned
graceful and curvy was that was my prison nickname.
And so the question is, are you going to have a sharp rebound? Which I don't hear too many people saying that. I don't think you're going to have a sharp rebound.
Like
I don't think
a V shape.
Yeah, a V shape. So I don't think you're going to see next month that everything's righting itself.
Back up to 370.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I think what you're going to see is more, you've got some younger children, you go through, when they go through kindergarten, they're trying to write their letters. And I think you're going to see more of that kid that does a U, where, they come down and they've got this long flat bottom, and then before it starts to go back up, it's probably going to be something more like that. How long and flat that bottom is that's where you're getting a lot of debate within the minds that are out there of what's going to happen going forward.
The debate in my mind is, how many times can Chris say long flat bottom without me making a joke?
Apparently once.
No, I think that was 2 or 3 times. Okay, you're killing me with all this.
So the long flat bottom.
the round, what was it? Curvy, graceful curves. Yeah. Okay, all right. So you're anticipating a longer bottom out, but when do you think it might start coming back up? What are you anticipating?
I think it's probably going to start to come up a little bit. Again, I think I've said this before, probably October, November of this year.
Kind of that typical holiday rush.
Maybe September, but you're probably more likely September, October, November. And I don't think it's going to be, even when it does start to recover, I don't think you're going to see this sharp uptick. It's still probably going to be more of a gradual incline. I mean, you think about it, it's really taken a year to get from where the peak was down to where we are right now. And it's probably going to be at least that long on the recovery side.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this then. Going back to my voter analogy, the guy who reads every article in every newspaper, whatever. At a certain point it's overkill, but there is a point to it. You want to be informed, because eventually you're going to have to vote, or do whatever other political thing, you want to do. In this, so outside of the analogy with the truckers, somebody needs to know this information. They need to know a certain amount of it. Why? What are they going to do with it? what's the point of knowing this stuff rather than just, gripping for dear life and holding on until it turns around?
I think there's a couple things that it really so a few things. First, it's going to help people make decisions about what they plan on do with their operations in the future. So you take, for example, right now, you're typically the summertime is when you really need to start looking at how many trucks am I going to add next year. And so what you think is going to happen with the freight market over the next 12 months is really going to be one of those things that will help you decide, do I want to add 0 trucks this year or next year? Do I want to add 5 trucks next year?
Yeah.
That's going to be a big factor there. Hiring, just managing your expenses, what decisions am I going to make? And having a relatively good feeling about what you think is going to happen in the market is going to help you make more informed and better decisions.
And I bet if some enterprising listener went back and listened to our episodes from 14, 16, 18 months ago, they might expect Haulin Assets to have more trucks and be further along at this point than it is, based on how you guys were feeling about the market at that point, because it was looking great. And now, do you feel like the company has slowed down a little bit? You just hired an operations manager, but still.
I mean, at one point we were planning on adding 5 trucks this year.
Right.
We're probably looking at more like 3.
Yeah.
But we pulled one off the road sooner.
The first
truck number 1.
Yeah.
Because of where the economy is right now. If we were in a really hot market, we could still make money with that truck, and we probably would have 11 trucks on the road right now instead of just 10.
Yeah. Okay. So how else is somebody going to use this info? So you're looking into the future and kind of planning for the company, but is there anything in the here and now that's going to be affected?
I think there are, because I think there's 2 big things that any trucking company really needs to focus on to kind of get them through, this downward trend in this valley. And really the first one is just managing your costs. You need to realize that, hey, now's the time when I do everything that I can to kind of sharpen the pencil and cut costs where I can, pennies. Pinch the pennies. Am I doing everything I can fuel wise to save money? Am I doing everything I can maintenance and, driver pay and everything else that there is out there? Is there anything else I can do to kind of, save a penny?
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
And then the second thing is really, and this is where Haulin Assets is, one of the areas that I think we need to and should be doing a little bit better is just, we're relying too much on the spot market, and the spot market is just, it's the worst of the worst right now. And so, one way that you can, if you've been relying on the spot market for a long time, one of the ways that you can kind of almost instantly get an uptick in revenue, even when, generally revenue is down, is by, replacing one spot market load with a direct shipper load. That right there is you're going to see a 10 to 30% increase in revenue without any additional increase in expense.
Is that something that you can work on while the market is so low? Or is that something, when the 7 years of plenty are going on, that's when you go find your direct shippers, and right now it's too late? Does that make sense? What are the possibilities?
So it's going to be a little bit more challenging in a market like this. It's not like shippers have so much freight that they're having a hard time finding carriers to carry it. They typically can find that, but there's still plenty of shippers out there that are working with brokerages that they'd rather not work with, and they'd rather find relationships with carriers and haul more of their freight directly with carriers. Most shippers prefer it that way. They would rather deal with the carrier rather than dealing with a broker who's dealing with a carrier, and they and oftentimes would rather eliminate the middleman too. And so it's probably going to take more beating the pavement and more phone calls and more discussions to find those shippers out there that are looking for carriers.
Yeah,
you can find them. It's going to be a little bit more work.
Well, then I'm out, Chris. Okay.
You don't do that.
That's right.
No sweat.
Well, not in this weather. Jeez, plenty of that going on. Okay, so is there anything else we're missing on this subject? Anything else you want to talk about, past, present, or future, with freight markets?
I think I just wrap it up and just say that it's not a great market right now. I think we're going to see some recovery, whether that's 3 months or 6 months down the road, we're going to see it. And the recovery is not going to be crazy stellar, but you'll go from making no profit to making a little bit of profit, and it'll kind of continually get a little bit better. And again, it's one of those things. You want your hook in the water for when the fish really start biting. Right. And are they going to really start biting 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, or a year down the road? I think we're going to see more and more fish biting, but you may not get those really big fish. That may be 6 months or 12 months down the road. But you want to be in a position to capitalize on that when the time comes.
Okay, duly noted. Now, Chris, you mentioned at the first part of the podcast that you wanted to talk about Brad a little more, the operations manager that you brought on. What else did you want to say about bringing somebody on?
Well, after we've kind of talked, it feels like a lot of the message that we've been spreading is doom and gloom, and to a certain extent, it's not. We're not painting a rosy picture, right? I don't think it's doom and gloom, but it's not where we want it to be,
right?
And you may think, after hearing all this, why the hell would you go out and increase your overhead by a pretty significant amount? And really, the reason behind that is because this is one of those decisions where we are looking towards the future. We're not. We're thinking, what can make Haulin Assets a better company, 6 months, a year down the road, not necessarily what's going to make it better today. And we really feel like this operations manager is a big step in that right direction. And again, we've been pretty conservative financially over the last 4 years that we've been in operation, not just in Haulin Assets, but also in my other businesses. And so we've got a little bit of a nest egg and ability to weather this kind of storm, even with hiring the operations manager. If we need to, we can dip into some reserves, and we think doing that, even if we have to dip into reserves, we're going to be better off in the long run. Having a guy like Brad growing with us, learning the business, and making a bigger impact. So that's one of the big significant reasons of why we decided to do this at this time.
Okay.
The second one is, what did I just kind of get done saying that we need to do a better job of?
Direct shippers, baby.
Direct shippers. And so, Nate and I, Nate just in the business in Haulin Assets is pretty tapped out time-wise. I'm between Haulin Assets and everything else that I've got going on, I'm pretty tapped out time-wise. So neither of us have really had the time dedicated necessary to make those extra phone calls like I talked about. It's not like you can go to 5 shippers and get loads from 3 of them right away. It may take 10 or 20 phone calls before you get one. And so we just haven't had the time to do that. And so now, as we're getting Brad more and more spun up and online and able to contribute, that's going to free especially Nate up to spend more time developing those direct relationships with shippers. So just to give you a case in point, we're planning on meeting on Thursday to kind of really start outlining that path forward, specifically with getting more and more direct shipper relationships going. And so we're gonna start really diving into that hardcore on Thursday.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to be interested. Like I said, Brad, I'm watching you. And so is everybody else now. We're all, no, I'm just kidding. But I am going to be interested to see how this goes. As you say, in the long term, what does Brad's role look like 18 months from now? And what sort of impact will he have had? It'll be really interesting to see.
It is. It'll be a fun process to watch. I really think if you look at all the things that we've done over the last several years, I think hiring Brad is going to be one of the more impactful, positive things that we've done as a company. And it's scary to think about, bringing on another employee at this point, but it's going to pay dividends.
Let's hope so. Well, that sounds like a bow on this episode, Chris. How are you feeling?
It's all wrapped up, I think.
All right. Let's do it. So to everybody listening, thank you so much. We are really glad that you listen. The reason we do this is because people continue to listen. In fact, for those who are listening, you have had an impact. We've watched our numbers grow, and we know that there are only 2 ways that is going to happen. One is you're giving us good ratings, on, iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. So continue to do that. We really appreciate it. But the best way for us to grow is word of mouth. And so if you enjoy this show, and we hope that you do, then join those who apparently are out there spreading the word. Because like I say, we see the numbers, and we really appreciate those of you who do so. So, when you're talking to your buddies, let them know that there's a podcast out there that can help them, from episode 1 right up till now, tackle the issues of going out on their own, striking out, and, running on their own authority. So, Chris, shall we?
Let's end it now.
Okay.
On a high note.
Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks.